Hello and welcome to the Eternal Expansion and Chapter Guide. As you might have noticed, I haven't posted a video in quite a while, but I'll try to release the next deck history video at the end of next week, and then get back into a steady but slower one video per month rhythm, switching between deck histories and top 10s. The main reason for the longer break was a time-intensive long-term project that I finally finished today, the Expansion and Chapter Guide. It's a 135-page Google Doc linked in the description below, in which I wrote about the fundamentals of expansions and chapters, which means how to get them and what they include, and in which I ordered them in tier lists based on the strength of the cards in them. To somewhat accurately measure card strength, I collected a lot of deck lists and sorted them by strength to then ascribe each expansion and chapter card a tier rating based on how strong the decks that those cards are part of are, and on how important they are for those decks. The Throne and Expedition tier lists that I made in the process, and links to all deck lists in them, most taken from other people on Eternal Warcry or Discord, but a fair amount made or at least updated by myself, can be found in the guide linked below. I also included budget replacement guides for a few decks, mostly high tier ones, in which I gave a step-by-step guide on which expansion, chapter and legendary cards you should prioritize for each deck, and on how to replace each of those cards until you have them. Without tournaments and later data, those tier lists and with them the card ratings won't be perfect, but I opened all my ratings and all my deck lists up to feedback on Discord to get them as precise as possible without any access to hard data. I also want to say thank you to everyone who gave feedback, who sent me additional deck lists or helped with reworking and updating older lists. And I have to give a special thanks to Anbal, without whom the rest of this video wouldn't be possible. They wrote a script to analyze the 116 Throne and 28 Expedition deck lists from the guide, regarding the appearance rates of each card, set, card type, rarity and power cost, and the data which we got this way was what I used to make some top 5 lists and diagrams for this video. Keep in mind that the data generated that way won't give you a perfect summary of the meta, because it doesn't take deck strength into account, which means an appearance of a card in a tier 5 deck counts the same as an appearance in a tier 1 deck, and that even with more than 140 decks total, I definitely didn't include every viable deck in each format, which means some decks are missing, which of course impacts the appearance rates, but I still think it's neat to see which cards appear in a lot of decks and which sets and rarities have the highest representation in each format. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at those stats, starting with the cards that appeared in the most deck lists. In Expedition, the 5 cards with the most main deck appearances are Rift Reader, Wasp, Seek Power, Master Archivist, Venus Masterpiece and Dangerous Gambit. That's a good indicator for the strength of time midrange decks on Expedition. Wasp is a huge threat that always gives you value, even if killed immediately, and that helps you ramp into your big threats, while Archivist helps you get to Wasp consistently, thanks to the Inscribe part, while also being a good blocker early and a big threat later on. Masterpiece, as the newest card here, gives those time midrange decks another value engine that can start drawing cards as early as turn 3 or 4 with units like Archivist. The 5 market cards with the most appearances look a bit more diverse, but Recovery is another strong card for Wasp midrange decks. Recovery also profits a lot from the recent release of Last Traveler, which it can bounce to prevent the Entomb effect from happening, giving you removal for basically free. Feed the Hackathon and Create Save are somewhat situational removal, but they are really efficient in the right spot, which makes them perfect for the market. Office is just a nice late game bomb for Shadow midrange decks that you can get in grindy matchups. And Mistral Drake is fast speed phase Aegis with Wilderness Delivery. The top 5 power cards from Expedition don't really tell us that much, but what we can clearly see is that marks are very important. The 5th mark, Mark of the Hive, also barely missed out on making the top 5. The marks are usually of higher priority than seeds or silixes, especially in 3+ faction decks, because they are more flexible if you really need double influence, because they can go for 2 different pairs of double influence instead of just 1, and they can be played undepleted at any time when you just need a tempo more than the influence fixing. Those were the 3 lists for Expedition card usage appearances. Now we look at Throne. And the top 5 main deck cards already show a completely different picture than for Expedition. Instead of time midrange, we see, with the exception of Exploit, very aggressively slanted cards, and all of them from the FPS factions. Torch is just too efficient and flexible to not make a list like this. You just don't get better removal than it. Dasher is in almost every aggro and some token decks that can play him, because he's very, very strong early on, but still strong later if you buff something else. Exploit is the most efficient way to slow down combo decks that is also consistently good in other matchups, because it can hit almost everything and fixes your power problems, thanks to Blunder. Condemn is cheap market access for cheap cards, which aggro and combo decks love. You can get counter spells or cheap removal, or cheap ways to go around blockers. And lastly, Blank is just a very flexible and cheap threat that basically every primal deck, except for maybe hard control and some combo decks, can easily play. The top market cards partly show the same picture as the top 5 main deck cards, with Open Contract and Permafrost as perfect Condemn targets, and strong picks for aggro and aggressive midrange decks that want to take out a blocker or threat as efficiently as possible, and with invasive species as a free small threat for aggressive decks that can empty their hand quickly. But we also have 2 time cards here, which we didn't have in the main deck list at all. Arc of Soul is decent in any time deck with a few cultists, but especially so in decks with Crack the Earth, because it gives you a cultist at fast speed on turn 1 that you can then sacrifice on turn 2 if it can hit phase. And Trail Scourge, which is also a great target for Crack the Earth, although less so in aggro and token decks and more so for midrange and combo. But it is also good in any other time market, because it can single-handedly win games against aggro, token, and even some midrange decks if played early enough, because it removes all of their board, or at least most of their board, and adds a 5/6 to your board. Lastly, we have the 5 power cards with the most appearances in Throne. Similarly to Expedition, we have a type of power that clearly dominates the list, in this case Paintings. They are undepleted when it matters the most in the format, as fast as Throne, and the incidental life gain can also help sometimes. Marks also have high appearance rates for the same reasons as they do in Expedition, but with more dual power competition they just get slightly less important. And lastly, Midnight Reprieve gets replaced by a better factionless all-faction power, Xultan Conclave. The 2 damage can definitely be a downside against aggro, but undepleted flexible fixing is very strong, especially in 3+ faction decks that don't have extremely high influence requirements. Next up, I want to take a quick look at the sets and expansions with the most card appearances. In Expedition we only have 2 sets, set 14 and 15, and if we consider that set 15 also includes the promos from the community bundle, they have a very similar appearance rate. The 2 expansions, the Devouring and Separate Ways, are also pretty close, but the Separate Ways is slightly higher. It's also slightly higher rated in the expansion guide. In Throne, set 1, 10 and 15 made the top 3, although we do have to take into account that set 1 is almost double the size of all the other sets, and that all 3 sets here have the advantage of strong power cycles. Set 1 with banners, and to a lesser degree seeds, set 10 with paintings, and set 15 with marks. A list without the inclusion of power cards would definitely look a bit different. The 3 most used expansions in Throne are Entity Arcanum, Shadow of the Spire, and Valley Beyond, all of which are also highly rated in the expansion guide. They all have some big power cards, for example the Creation Project for Entity Arcanum, Jack Mercenary Hunter for Shadow of the Spire, or Dino Nest for Valley Beyond, but they also have flexible staples and fun build-arounds, which translates well into high appearance rates. And now for the last statistic, I want to look at rarity distribution. In Expedition, rares are the backbone of most decks, with uncommons slightly behind. Promos also have a fairly high play rate, partly inflated because the cards from the community bundle also count as promos. The Throne rarity distribution looks similar, but with way more expansions and sets and comparatively fewer promos. Their play rate dwindles, and uncommon is the rarity that profits the most from that, overtaking rare as the most played rarity. That's it from me. You can check out the expansion and chapter guide in the description below, and you can find all my other videos, including the deck history and Eternal Top 10 series, on my channel. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a nice rest of the week.